Joining me on the program this morning, one of the good guys or good gals is WIL, Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty Associate Counsel, Kate Spitz. Good morning, Kate. How are you?
Good morning, Meg. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me this morning.
You're welcome. I presume that you are back in Wisconsin after a trip to Washington, D.C. last week.
That is correct. We were privileged to be invited out to see House Speaker Kevin McCarthy sign a resolution related to an ESG matter that I understand we'll be discussing this morning.
Yes, absolutely. Well, let's start by discussing this lawsuit against the Biden administration over illegal ESG. You know, we hear all these buzz terms that the left torments us with. Let's start by talking about what ESG is and why you're suing the Biden administration.
Sure thing, Meg. So ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance Factors. And at its most basic, what these factors are sort of social programs that a lot of corporations have undertaken to pick up political goodwill. So reducing a carbon footprint or putting a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative as part of their hiring practices, this sort of thing. And the rule that we are challenging in what is our seventh lawsuit against the Biden administration allows fiduciaries who are in charge of retirement plans, 401ks, to select where to put investors' money based on these social programs rather than on how much investment return they're going to bring for your retirement account.
Oh my gosh, I'm so irritated by that. So what's the point? I mean, if you're not guaranteed a certain return, you have to instead invest in what the Biden administration tells you to do. How is that American or constitutional or legal?
Well, we're arguing that it's not legal. Under the ERISA law, which has been in place since 1974, the main objective of these 401k accounts is to maximize the return for the American worker so that we're saving our hard-earned money for retirement. As many of us know, right, money comes out of our paycheck in the here and now. We don't get to spend that money. We invest it with these folks through our 401k plan, and then we're expecting that to grow over time so that when we reach retirement, we're able to retire comfortably. So the issue with weighing these non-financial sort of green wish list factors as part of the investment decision is that they really aren't shown to make any more money and, in fact, can often make less money. And therefore, it's cutting against that objective of saving for retirement. And worse than that, Meg, it's the politicization of our retirement accounts. I mean, there are so few things these days that most Americans can agree on, but over 140 million of us are invested in a 401k, and to have those investments politicized in the name of this administration's political wish list is just inexcusable. So that's why we've brought this lawsuit challenging that rule.
So do you see this? Well, a judge ruling in favor of us, of the American citizen?
Well, you know, it's a little too early to say. I can tell you that we're at the stage of the lawsuit where we have filed our complaint and we have asked the court to not enforce the rule, essentially to take it off the books. The government will be filing its response later this month, and then we'll know. But it's a little too soon to say how it's going to come out. But there is, I guess, one other way that we may end up with a finding for the American taxpayer, and that is through some recent congressional action that has taken place.
Well, let's talk about that because that is, I guess, also critical to the results of this, I don't know, this ridiculousness known as ESG. So let's talk. There's legislation. Are you confident that, well, I guess Biden would have to sign it into law, correct?
Correct. So just to bring everyone up to speed on where that is, the House and the Senate both passed on a bipartisan basis. So both Republicans and some Democrats voted for this. They voted to shoot down this rule precisely because this is the politicization of over 140 million retirement accounts in this country. So that has been signed. And it's sitting on President Biden's desk right now. He has the chance to make this right this week by signing that resolution. I'm not optimistic, frankly, that he'll do it. I think he is likely to cave in to his political constituencies on the left and keep this going so that the lawsuit would be the way to dispose of the rule. But, we can hope, right? We were able to actually be out in D.C. last week to see House Speaker McCarthy sign that resolution. So that was a real privilege to do.
So is this, I'm trying to wrap my mind around this. Is this a mandatory rule for investment companies?
It's not mandatory in the sense that fiduciaries are not required to select based on these factors, although that was the original text of the rule that the Biden administration wanted before a number of people submitted comments against that. But it does allow folks to make selections based on those factors. And part of the issue with that, Meg, is that a lot of these larger brokerage houses where the 401ks are being administered, they do have a lot of folks who are very interested in virtue signaling with your retirement account. So there are people who will latch onto this rule and who will act upon it, even though the language within it is not technically mandatory.
I'm almost inclined to say, so let the left invest in all of these schemes and they can lose all their money, and then we'll invest in that which we are confident is going to make us money, and we'll see how things shake out. It's amazing to me that those on the left, because generally they're quite conservative with their own money. It's just everyone else's money that they want to spend.
Right. And unfortunately, I wish it were that easy. But as part of the rule, there is not a really significant disclosure requirement to people like you and me that these ESG factors are being considered. It's one of the major issues we have with this rule is that the American worker whose funds are being invested may not even know that the plan managers are making these choices based on these environmental, diversity, and other social factors.
So what can we do, Kate? What can we do to support your lawsuit, and what can we do to actually see the results that you're trying to achieve?
Well, I think there are a number of things we can do at your own level with your own retirement account. Keep an eye on it and feel free to ask someone in HR or your plan manager whether these factors are being considered, see if they even know. But in terms of supporting our efforts, you can visit our website. We are at will-law.org, and there's information there on how to support our efforts. There are also copies of some of the papers we filed in this lawsuit if folks are interested in reading up on that.
Well, let's in our remaining time, let's talk about the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty and what your organization does and what you provide to clients.
Sure. So we are a public interest law firm. So we bring cases that are in the public interest. We represent folks for free who have interests that are larger than just a single case. So in this case, when we're challenging the ESG rule, for example, we have two plaintiffs, workers like you and me. They happen to live in Waukesha County, but they really stand in the shoes of those over 140 million American workers who are affected by this rule. And so we provide representation in cases like these, challenging government overreach, infringement on free speech and religious liberty, and these sorts of issues. We're standing up to some of the trends that have been really disturbing against the values that our American society is built upon.
Do you need more plaintiffs to sign on to this case, or are the two that you have sufficient?
The two that we have are sufficient at this time. But, there are always other rules, other efforts that are going to be implemented by this administration. They have signaled that ESG is a big issue for them. For example, there is a public company disclosure rule with the SEC that is coming out, so we'll be looking for plaintiffs for that. So if anyone is on the board of a publicly traded company, we'd be happy to speak with them. But otherwise, we are just, we're set, I think, with our plaintiffs for the Department of Labor rule that we've been discussing this morning.
It's really interesting, Kate, how the left is quite masterful at hiding under a term or a way to describe what they're doing in a way that doesn't seem to be offensive, I guess. This ESG rule or environmental, social, and governance. I mean, I think that they spend just as much time in calculation with what they call their pet projects as they do the rule itself, because I think that what they're trying to do is conceal from the public what indeed they really are attempting to do.
Well, I think that's a good point, Meg, and it's certainly a way to evade accountability. The Green New Deal, as we know, never made it through Congress, has never been popular, but using these ESG factors and putting pressure on companies to support green initiatives that go beyond what is required by law is one way of trying to get at that policy issue without having to pass it through Congress, where people like you and me could vote out a representative who makes decisions on our behalf that we don't like. We don't have that right with somebody like the Secretary for the Department of Labor. So you make an excellent point in that regard. We are trying to hold people accountable, and the administration is, in our opinion, trying to evade that accountability by going through administrative rules instead of through Congress.
Well, thank you, and keep up the good work. I look forward to hearing about your 8th lawsuit against the Biden administration. Kate Spitz from Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. If you want more information about their organization, will-law.org. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, Meg. I appreciate you having me on. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too. Going to go to a break, and we'll be right back.